Good evening, Who Dat Nation, and happy Wednesday to our Bayou Blitz family. I am Bob Rose, one of your currently unsigned free agents, through the NFL signing period. Joining me is another free agent, younger, prettier, smarter. Brendan, I don't know if you're faster, even at my advanced years, and out of shapedom. I'll give you younger, faster, smarter, prettier. Or younger, prettier, I'll give you the other stuff. Welcome, Brendan Boylan, my co-host of the Bayou Blitz. How are you this Wednesday?
I'm good. I was never athletic or fast, so I'll give it to you. Pretty, younger, yes, I will take that one, and I remind you of it every week. I'm good. I'm good. It's at least warming up here down south just a
Yep.
little bit. I'm sure it is up your way as well. Um, the Saints are still in that mode of, I guess, as of today, they're under the cap,
Mm-hmm.
but got under the cap. And as Bob and I told you, this first wave of free agency for New Orleans was going to be a little quiet, which is going to make some people upset because, well, everybody has a right to be upset about something, I suppose. Uh, but we knew it was going to be quiet. They went, and we'll get into the signing of linebacker Willie Gay, who Bob actually wrote an article on a few weeks ago on why he would be a good fit for New Orleans. It's the only move they've really made outside of some fullbacks as well in re-signing Adam Prentice. But I can't reiterate this enough. We told you it was going to be quiet, and that doesn't mean wave one doesn't mean like the first day. Like the Saints might not make another move for days with a Z, not even an
Mm-hmm.
S, a Z. Well, a lot of you guys are falling asleep waiting for a move to happen. This is not a team that's in prime position, especially in their cap situation, to go out and try to make the big pitch. They got to wait for guys to sit a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
recognize that their market might not be what they were hoping for, and then the Saints come in and give them a deal or what have you. I mean, honestly, I don't even know if Wave 2 will be that busy. Like, this to me seems like a Saints organization that's going to, I won't say hit home runs, but they might hit some doubles. They might get on base when it comes to, that third wave. That's where I see the Saints making crucial decisions that can, make or break this football team. And I say
Mm-hmm.
that every year. If you guys want to go back, whether we're talking about free agency, the draft, any of that stuff, it's always that wave three or day three finds that end up making or breaking a team uh, to to make the playoffs. And I find that to be even more so true this year as the Saints are still working to get under the cap and then letting go of some fan favorites in the process as well. Bob, I do want to start there before we get into the new faces. Let's talk about some of the departing faces. Now, some of these we knew they were coming. But Michael Thomas officially a free agent as of today.
Love you.
Jameis Winston leaves New Orleans. That should come as a surprise to no one. But Winston is agreeing to a deal to back up Deshaun Watson in Cleveland and getting paid very handsomely
Mm-hmm.
to over $8 million for the 1 year deal for Winston. Bob, none of those come as a surprise, but there may be a few that come as a little bit of a surprise or guys that maybe we felt like New Orleans may entertain bringing back. Zach Bond comes to mind for like the latter category of, well, maybe New Orleans, now that they finally figured out how to use him, will bring him back. He ends up signing with the Eagles. Bob, your initial takeaways on some of these guys that have departed, and I know you have a list in front of you. I know that it's not a yellow legal pad. I think it's a white legal pad, but I know
It
the
is.
legal pad is sitting there
Yes, it is.
with a list of departures. So let's go ahead and get everybody caught up.
Well, yeah, and yeah, as you pointed out, Zach Bond, yeah, signed a 1-year deal to join the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles have a defensive system that fits Zach Bond's best skill sets. And as you pointed out, and as we both said many times this past season, it took 3.5 years to figure out how to use Bond. And once they did, he flashed what he could do. Given the opportunity. But yeah, the point is still that the defensive scheme that the Saints want to run is a poor fit for Zach Bond's best skill set. A team like Pittsburgh, a team you and I pointed out many times over the years. Philadelphia, they're going to use Bond, as a stand-up rush linebacker in space. He's going to be a specialty player, and play special teams. And the fact that Bond's 1-year contract is very similar to the type of deal that Willie Gay got to join the New Orleans Saints from the Kansas City Chiefs, I think is very telling to the way not only the Eagles but really the rest of the league feels about Zach Bond. You mentioned Michael Thomas. It's a sad split. It's unceremonious for one of the best players in franchise history, arguably the best wide receiver in team history. To me, he's second to Marcus Colston, but he certainly warrants the argument for the number one spot. Marcus May, the safety, his release just became official today. I do expect somebody will sign him. Lonnie Johnson, role player, safety last year, rejoining the Houston Texans. You mentioned Jameis Winston. And in the least shocking news of free agency, Sean Payton signs a New Orleans Saint free agent. With Malcolm Roach joining the Denver Broncos, on I believe it was a 2-year deal. Again, no shock there. And probably the biggest news as far as potential losses today, outside of Michael Thomas, which we all knew was coming, was Andrus Peat. Andrus Peat is going to officially hit the free agent market. His deal voided, and he and the team did not agree to a re-signing, which means Pete's going to be on the open market. That doesn't rule out necessarily him coming back, but at this point, you got to consider that doubtful because Andrus Peat is going to count for dead money on the Saints salary cap. I'm not fully aware of the figure off the top of my head, but he's going to count against the Saints salary cap in the dead money category for the next 2 years. If Andrus Peat comes back, he will likely do so. In doing so, he would lose money, because the Saints would bring him back, on a low structured deal, probably a 1-year deal, with an extra voided year attached. So that way, Andrus isn't exactly giving away money. So basically, the complexities of this mean that Andrus Peat will probably be in another team's uniform, in 2024. And he was a player that a lot of analysts, you and I included, speculated might be back, for the New Orleans Saints after playing so well last year. And that's other than Ryan Ramczyk being yet another veteran to restructure, which saves a significant amount. On the salary cap, Ryan Ramczyk's restructure, it was the other big news of the day.
Unfortunately, when you take Ramczyk's restructure, saving the Saints about $14 million, and you take the dead money of Pete of $13 million, they about cancel each other out. Now, you asked me this last week, right? When we were at the end of the show and we're doing dot or drop, and you asked me, it was either last week or the week prior, what dot or drop you asked, should the Saints prioritize Andrus Peat? And I said, yes. Like at this point, you almost have to. Well, now with the dead money situation, you're putting a lot of pressure on Trevor Penning to perform. A guy who started the season, lost his job, had moments, had other moments. It's a lot of pressure for, and I know what some of you are thinking. Brendan, what are you talking about? Pressure? This guy's a first-round pick. He hasn't lived up to expectations. a lot of times when you have a first round pick that hasn't lived up to expectations, one of the worst things you can do to them is throw them to the fire.
Hmm.
And this is a potential situation if the Saints don't bring in a guy who can compete with him in camp. And right now, you're looking at the roster, you're looking at the Andrews Pete situation. You go, well, James Hurst would be the only guy that would compete with him in camp. And if Trevor Penning, no offense to James Hurst, because I think his role with this team being a guy who can play just about every spot on the line if he had to is significant. But if your first round pick cannot beat out James Hurst at James Hurst's age, I think that says a lot about your first round pick in Trevor Penning.
Hmm.
I still have a lot of faith in Trevor Penning. I think the size is there. I think the nastiness is there. Some of the intangibles are there, but he hasn't caught up to that NFL speed. There were some concerns coming in the draft about foot speed for him. There was a lot of concerns about that, and his feet haven't caught up yet. He's great in the run game because he's a mauler, but pass game hasn't worked out so much. Now, with the Kubiak system and the Kubiak schemes, does that benefit Trevor Penning a little bit more than Carmichael's? Maybe, but not enough to slot him in as your for sure week one starter. That's the concerning part when it comes to the Andrews Pete news. You
Yeah.
were almost hoping that they had a deal lined up in place for when free agency opened today, but they didn't. And like you said, Bob, the likelihood of him coming back is a lot lower now. Could Pete come back and do the whole hometown discount on a 1 year deal and whatnot? Sure. But here's the other thing you have to remember, particularly about offensive linemen. Their windows are just as short to get paid as your skill position players. Like I compare a good long offensive lineman career similar to a running back at this point, right? Because what do you consider a good long career for a running back? You'd say prime years 5,
5, 7 tops.
and then maybe a couple years there at the end, right? So let's make it an even number at 10. Would be a good long career if you had half of that career was your prime years. It's about the same for offensive linemen. I look at Andrews
Mhm.
Pete and go, okay, he's a little past his prime. He has played now not 8, 9 years.
15. So yeah, you're right.
His 9th year. So
Mhm.
guess what? This is probably the last contract where Pete could see some serious money. Do you think at his age, multiple Pro Bowl appearances, proved he could play tackle if needed, that he's not going to try to chase the bag? I mean, if I was him, I would.
Sure.
Right? I think anybody would in that position. So I don't think there's going to be a hometown discount to come back to New Orleans. I think it's New Orleans. You got to pay me. And New Orleans is going to be like, well, we got all this dead cap money from you, and he's going to be like, that's not my problem. That's your problem.
Hmm.
So Pete's likely not going to be back. What does that mean for Nick Saldiveri, a 4th-round pick from last year's draft? There's a lot of things that are going to be up in the air. I think there's a lot of things the Saints still need to focus on in free agency with some of the departures and pending departures at this point as well. But with that, let's kind of transition into what the Saints have actually done so far before we talk about other things that could happen in free agency. I've already seen someone in the comments say, what about Chase Young? We'll get into all of that, I promise. Let's talk about the moves that the Saints did make. The big one was Willie Gay, the 2-time Super Bowl champion linebacker, a guy that I don't remember who it was. Somebody gave me credit on Twitter, and I've had a busy week, and I haven't been able to respond. But I had nothing. I never once said Willie Gay. It was all Bob, all right? I appreciate the credit. I should just take it anyway. But that was all Bob. Bob had the article about a week ago on how he could be a good fit. Last show, Bob highlighted him as his, top 1 or 2 targets for the Saints, and they get it done yesterday They agreed to terms today, put the pen to paper. Bob, why does this make so much sense for the New Orleans Saints? And, you know, I'd say once a year, sometimes we're lucky and we get it twice a year where you're really on top of a free agent signing or you just slaughter a draft class in your prediction. So how do you keep doing this?
Um, I would love to tell you skill, but yeah, the reality is, just like any other good analyst, yeah, I work my tail off and I occasionally get lucky. Willie Gay seemed like the perfect fit for the New Orleans Saints. Uh, similar situation to Demario Davis when Demario joined the Saints in 2018. Davis had a very good 5-year career up to that point. With mostly the New York Jets, but there was 1 year in there with the Cleveland Browns too. Davis was a very good player, but uh, really slipped under the radar of the national awareness, and largely because of the teams that he played for. Willie Gay, because of the offensive explosiveness with the Kansas City Chiefs, and a guy named Chris Jones on the defensive side. Willie Gay was one of those defenders that just kind of slipped under the radar for the Chiefs, but that did a very good job his first 4 years in the NFL. What Willie Gay brings to the New Orleans Saints is speed, athleticism, and lateral tenacity. Just a guy that's going to chase down plays and has the speed to beat the ball to the corner. He's not. He doesn't bring Davis's brand of physicality. He's not going to be a guy that steps into the gap, and takes out both lead blocker and ball carrier in one fell swoop. But he does have decent awareness, which allows him to be in the right position. And when he is when he is beaten on a play, he has the speed and athleticism to make up for it. This is exactly the type of player that most Saints fans have been asking for as a running mate to Demario Davis for really the last 4 years. Pete Werner is serviceable. Pete Werner is a solid player, but Pete Werner has serious limitations, especially in open space, in coverage, and in lateral pursuit. And those are all the strengths that Willie Gay brings to the table. The only thing that disappoints me about this signing is the fact that it was only for 1 year. Davis himself was re-signed for on a 2-year deal, so he'll probably finish his career with the New Orleans Saints. But I would have liked to see a player like Willie Gay be brought in on at least a 2-year contract. Now, if he plays really well to open the season, the Saints are smart enough, and cagey enough where they'll probably sit down with his representatives and try to iron out a long-term deal. But because of his athleticism and what he can do on the field, because of Warner's ability against the run as a downhill defender, and because Demario Davis is still one of the top 3 overall off-ball linebackers in the NFL. A Saints defense that typically only runs 2 linebackers can now put 3 linebackers in a base 4-3 alignment, in a traditional base 4-3 alignment, and really not sacrifice athleticism and not sacrifice beef against the run. I love this signing, folks. I do.
I think that's been the biggest thing that's been missing for New Orleans, right? And we both had it when Warner was drafted. I think you kind of hammered it home on your analysis of the film, maybe a little bit stronger than anybody else when we were doing those roundtables at the time for Saints News Network. But the lack of athleticism from Warner in pass coverage, and sideline to sideline speed was a concern of yours. It showed up in the NFL. That doesn't mean Pete Warner's not a good player,
No.
because when he's on the field, he is.
Mm-hmm.
When he's asked to do the things that highlight his skill set, really good. But you go back to what you said in terms of a running mate with Demario Davis, and the one thing that Saints fans loved about Quan Alexander was all the things you just highlighted in Willie Gay. Now, Quan has had a very unfortunate run of injuries since his time in New Orleans, and it seemed like he was the perfect fit. The Saints are getting a similar player to that. But now on top of that, you have a veteran in Pete Werner as well, who's proven what he can do at the NFL level. You know, really good downhill tackler, can plug up those rushing lanes, plug up the gaps, and you're not having to worry about Demario Davis at 34, 35 years old having to be the only linebacker on your roster that you can trust in pass coverage. Now you have a guy in Willie Gay. That also, I think that also helps the Saints in terms of, God, how many years has it been where it seems like the Saints' base alignment was like a 3 safety alignment? And having a box safety, that takes a lot of pressure off of guys like Tyrann Mathieu, whoever, plays free safety this season. And it takes a little bit of pressure off of having to go get a guy in free agency or in the draft that you think you can plug and play and make an immediate impact. I think that's really big for New Orleans. And it also allows them to toy around with some things. I know they were toying with Alontae Taylor in the slot, and you still might see him be your third box safety, if you will, similar to what Dennis Allen has ran for the last however many years in New Orleans. But being able to come out in a base 4-3 alignment with 3 linebackers is going to be huge. I really like the signing. I'm also a fan of any time, and yes, this is underrated. Yes, this is something that analysts look to, not to Madden GMs. You guys don't care, right, about what I'm about to say, Madden GMs. Championship pedigree is important.
It is.
Guys who have been there, been a part of teams that have been successful, but not just rode the bench. Guys that have made winning plays for teams that have won Super Bowls. I think that's really important for New Orleans as well, and it's something that the Saints have missed over the years. So I really like the signing.
Well, and now on that defensive side, you have four former Kansas City Chiefs that won at least one ring, with Andy Reid, and Tyrann Mathieu, Willie Gay, Colin Saunders, and Tano Passanio. So there's something to be said for that championship pedigree.
Yeah, and having that on the defensive side of the ball, because what defense wins championships, no matter what people want to say, I think it's really important. I don't want to say, I don't want to say less exciting news, but news that fell a little under the radar. The Saints making some moves at the fullback position. Fullbacks are a dying breed. I really doubt, this is going to sound sad, I really doubt my brother's watching this right now because I bet he's working. But Liam, how many years have I told you that fullbacks are people too? And fullbacks deserve to be celebrated as well because they can make huge impacts on the game. The Saints got 2 of them. Bob, let's talk fullbacks. Because right now it seems like the Saints are Oprah Winfrey. You get a fullback. You get a fullback. And that's really it because that's how many fullbacks are left in the NFL. Just the 2 that they signed, essentially. But the Saints bring back one familiar face, and it was reported last week, but it's going to become officially official here in the coming days. They get another fullback on the roster as well, which means what, Bob? It's those magic words. Can you get ready? Are you ready for training camp positional battle of the fullbacks? I can't wait for that Bob Rose article. A whole preview on who's going to win the fullback job from Bob Rose. I'm excited.
I'll probably given what time of year that'll be too, I'll probably end up doing that kind of article from the beach, to add added interest to it. But yeah, I mean, Adam Prentice, he knows the offensive personnel. He's been the Saints' primary fullback for the last 3, maybe 4 years. And then they added Xander Horvath. Now the thing about Xander, full first name Alexander, by the way. The thing about Xander is he was very impressive a few years ago in pre-draft workouts and at the combine, catching the ball. And that's honestly what got him drafted by the Chargers in the 7th round. He made the team as a rookie. Even got some significant snaps, scored a couple of touchdowns, caught a handful of passes in goal line situations, and then been a practice squad player primarily the last 2 years. So yeah, this is not. Both of these fullbacks are not going to make this team. As Brendan said, this is going to be a legitimate camp battle. Whoever fits better for Clint Kubiak's scheme. And Clint Kubiak, Rick Dennison, they like to use the fullback, not so much as a rusher, but as a pass catcher. And you have to be a good lead blocker, a very good lead blocker in that scheme. So it'll be very interesting who wins the battle. If the Saints add anybody else, an undrafted free agent, undrafted rookie or two that they like, wouldn't surprise me either. Because again, fullback is a position that's very much utilized by the Clint Kubiak, Rick Dennison offensive scheme. So this could be a legitimate battle, folks.
I think for Prentice, especially as of the last 2 years, you could probably go his whole Saints tenure at this point. Gets what? 3 carries, 4 carries a season. Not really utilized in the red zone outside of an extra blocker. Only, in Carmichael's system, really only lined up in the backfield in the shotgun to be an extra blocker. And extra blockers are important. But when I think fullbacks, I think some of the fullbacks that made big plays, made differences. Mike Tolbert immediately comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
John Kuhn, who was a Saint late in his career, but his time in Green Bay was super utilized. One of my favorite Saints names of all time, Jedediah Gabriel Collins, was utilized that way.
Mm-hmm.
Not to the degree of Kuhn or Mike Tolbert, but Collins had a handful of touchdowns. Collins touched the ball in the red zone. And you talk about that Kubiak scheme and that Kubiak system, and I think Xander fits that better than Prentice does. But Prentice is going to get the opportunity to fight for his job because of the experience he has, the relationships he's built, how long he's been here. So I think that is going to be an interesting, underrated battle. I don't think it's going to make headlines. I don't think it's going to break a ton of news. But fullbacks are people too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm excited for a camp battle at the fullback position. Now, Bob, we've got people who have questions. We have rumors about Saints being interested in certain people.
Mm-hmm.
We have a former top pick of the draft that is scheduled to visit 2 NFC South teams, the Saints included on that list. So let's dive headfirst into Chase Young, the former Buckeye. And, Bob, I don't know if you knew this, but the Saints like Ohio State Buckeyes.
I heard that.
There may be a pipeline there. I don't know. Maybe I'm just reading too far into things. But Chase Young, a guy who was traded at the deadline last year, was a part of the 49ers team that played in the Super Bowl. Consistency's been the biggest knock on Young, but when he's on, he is on.
Yeah.
I still think he's going to get a sizable contract offer wherever he lands. I won't say huge money, but shoot, if Jadeveon Clowney was getting some of the money he did over the last couple years, I'm sure Chase Young is going to get more. How much should people read into this visit? Is it the Saints doing some due diligence, especially in a position of need as Cameron Jordan, unfortunately, is starting to show his age? Or is this like legitimate mutual interest between the two sides?
I think it's more legitimate mutual interest between the two sides. Now, it's my belief that Chase Young is looking for exactly what you pointed out and exactly what I wrote about when I wrote the article about Chase Young, and the connection to the potential connection to the New Orleans Saints. I believe that Chase Young and his representatives are looking for a long-term deal. If that's the case, then the Saints' chances to sign him are pretty slim. Let's be honest here, mainly because of the salary cap issues and the lack of proven production from Chase Young. In other words, it's too big a gamble for the New Orleans Saints to do the financial juggling that they would have to do to get Chase Young in, because you do that and it fails, and you're really looking at deep trouble with that position there. Not just that position, but your whole roster because of the money that you tied up. However, we don't know what kind of market there will actually be for Chase Young. You pointed out the Jadeveon Clowney scenario. I'll cite the Marcus Davenport scenario. A player Chase Young is often compared to because of ability, but lack of availability because of injuries and lack of consistent production on the field. Where there's smoke, there's some smoke, there to that comparison. When Davenport left the Saints last year, he got a 1-year, fairly small offer contract with the Minnesota Vikings. And even Davenport just signed yesterday, I think it was, with the Detroit Lions. It was a 2-year deal, but still not a gargantuan deal. So we don't know what the market for Chase Young is going to be, and that's why I wrote the article. I knew the Saints would visit him, and then like you said, they in turn scheduled the visit, with Young to occur this week, probably tomorrow. If not tomorrow, then by Friday, for sure. My hunch is if Chase Young doesn't get the long-term deal that he wants, then the Saints will probably be the favorites to land him in a 1-year kind of what's called a prove it deal. And in that scenario, it sets up a potential win-win for both sides. For the Saints, you're talking about a position that is in desperate need of a dynamic disruptor. Cam Jordan, fading fast. At this stage of his career, my opinion, Cam should be a situational player. Peyton Turner, you don't know what you have in Peyton Turner because he's never on the field. He's missed, I think, 34 of a possible 34, 37 of a possible 51 games since he came to the league. That's beyond ridiculous. Marcus Davenport, bust, gone. Isaiah Foskey, I'm not ready to give up on Foskey yet, and I don't think the Saints are yet either. But he's going to be coming into his second year after doing absolutely nothing as a rookie. So are you going to really count on a huge jump in his development and production? The kind of huge jump you need for your defense to be successful? I doubt it. Which is why edge rusher again is such a big need. Most of us have them picking an edge rusher in the first, with a first or second round draft choice. But if a guy like Chase Young becomes available, you sign him to a 1-year deal, a 1-year deal, 2-year deal, with a void, with an option to void after the first year. In other words, not a heavy financial commitment. And for Chase Young, it's a potential win because all the things that I just described about the Saints situation and the Saints being desperate for a big performer, if you, Chase Young, sign a short deal to come in and you end up being that big performer for the team, now at just 25 years old he is now you have set yourself up for a slam dunk, long-term lucrative extension, if not with New Orleans, then with someone else. So that's why I painted it out to be a win-win. Now Chase is also going to visit with the Carolina Panthers. I believe he has a visit with the Tennessee Titans, if I'm not mistaken, as well. And it wouldn't surprise me if there were a couple other teams that threw interest in there. If one of those teams swoop in with a 3-4 year deal, worth an average of about 12, 14 million or so, no way the Saints are going to go for that because, I'm not saying they can't because of finances, because we've seen them be able to pull miracles. They can't because of the financial risk involved if that kind of signing doesn't pan out.
I think the biggest thing with Chase Young is I think a lot of times the name, like a recognizable name, carries a lot more weight in free agency. And I'll go back to the Clowney example because Clowney was a guy that had a lot of skill, had some flashes, didn't have a lot of consistency. But the numbers that continued to get thrown at him despite production was a scary thing. And I can see this kind of playing out the same way where Chase Young gets a big deal. Deserving, maybe. But I don't see this being a situation where Chase Young is sitting in the second wave of all this going, where are all my offers at? Well, let me take this New Orleans offer for $7 million as a prove it deal or whatever, or even 10. Like, I don't see that being the case. I think the Saints have to do their due diligence. I think it's smart of them to do their due diligence. I just don't see a situation where financially it's going to make a lot of sense. Unless I'm totally wrong and he just has absolutely no market. But because of the name, because of where he was selected, and because even, some of the hype when he was thrown up on the trade block, I think he's going to have a market. And I don't think the Saints are going to be able to fit that market. Let's talk about, and just because DJ threw it out there in the chat, he said Oakland released a wide receiver. I think he's coming to New Orleans. He's been linked for a couple years now.
Yeah.
And as you guys know, being a Carolina guy, of course I love Hunter Renfrow. Does he really fit what the Saints need, though? A quality receiver, like third receiver, sure. Would I love to see a receiver with a little bit more size because A.T. Perry right now is the only guy with size on this roster? Yes. But if you get Renfrow at a deal, considering one of his best seasons of his career came with Derek Carr, would it be silly to entertain the thought? No, I think it makes a lot of sense to entertain the thought and see, hey, can we get the best out of Hunter Renfrow after he was underutilized, underused the last year and some change in Oakland/Las Vegas? I think that sometimes where there's smoke, there's fire, and there's been a lot of smoke around Hunter Renfrow in New Orleans over the last few years. Bob, what say you?
Yeah, I could see the match between Hunter Renfrow and the New Orleans Saints. And listen, not only is A.T. Perry the only receiver with size on this roster, they only have 3 receivers under contract currently: Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and A.T. Perry. Now, if you go into the regular season with those 3 as your top 3 receivers, I'm okay with that. But the fact is that they have literally nobody else. You can't even say count bodies on the roster. Therefore, I expect New Orleans to add a few receivers this offseason to, if nothing else, fill out their depth chart. And at least one of those receivers are going to be added off of veteran free agency. Now, you mentioned Hunter Renfrow. Mike Williams just got released from the Chargers today. Now I expect Mike to get a fairly sizable contract somewhere. So he probably won't be a Saint. But I keep banging, and I will keep banging the KJ Osborne drum. He's my Willie Gay of the offense. The guy I've been yelling for pretty much as soon as the offseason started. Certainly as soon as Kubiak was hired. Tyler Boyd, also a free agent. Now, with Tyler Boyd, you're talking a number 2 receiver here. Whereas you line up him and Olave outside, you can literally put Rashid Shaheed anywhere along the formation. The type of scenario that I think would benefit the Saints greatly. Another receiver that I think is going to fly under the radar, but whoever signs him is going to get themselves a good player. Josh Reynolds from the Detroit Lions. Curtis Samuel, you want to talk about a versatile guy, not a big guy, but a versatile guy. Chris Conley played with Clint Kubiak in San Francisco last year. Van Jefferson, Matt Collins, free agents that did nothing with Atlanta, but had some decent production prior to that earlier in their careers. So there are some receivers out there. I realize the Hunter Renfrow is the name that we're going to keep hearing because of his connection with Derek Carr, and he is, like you said, Brendan, it's not that he's a sizable target, but he's an intermediate possession receiver. And that's something, without Michael Thomas. Now, you're talking apples, oranges between Renfrow and Thomas, because of the physicality that Michael Thomas brought. But they need a receiver that's going to be able to work those quality, bring in those quality intermediate catches, because that will open things up over the top for both Olave and Shaheed, who can also, by the way, work the middle of the field very well. Each are very good route runners. Particularly Shaheed is an underrated one. But you want those guys to strike fear in a defense with their speed. And to be able to do that, you need other weapons to work that underneath and to cause that coverage to kind of pinch and sheet up. Hunter Renfrow, KJ Osborne, Tyler Boyd, those are the type of guys that can do that.
I'm glad you said Mac Hollins, because he was the guy, and we've heard the joke, the Las Vegas Saints, the New Orleans Raiders, but that's another guy where it's like, well, there'd be some mutual interest, might be a stretch, but best seasons of his career with Derek Carr would make sense too. I think you bring up a good point when it comes to Renfrow and his ability to work the short to intermediate, and the fact that now the Saints have a hole there. Now, could Olave do that? Yes. Could Shaheed do that? Yes. By doing that, are you taking away some of their greatest abilities as playmakers? Yes. So to have a guy designated on the roster to work that part of the field, I think would be a smart thing for New Orleans to look at. You said there's only 3 receivers under contract.
I believe I'm correct. I think Keith Kirkwood is an unrestricted guy again. Now they could bring Kirkwood back. They did not. Lynn Bowden was a restricted free agent that they did not make a qualifying offer for, so he becomes an unrestricted free agent. Again, they could bring Lynn Bowden back. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they brought one or both of these guys back. But currently, they are just not under contract with the New Orleans Saints.
That's all. I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly what I was leaning into. Was those guys would come back almost undoubtedly on training camp deals if they don't sign somewhere else. But if they're available and the Saints are looking at it, and we play the game that we did last year where we go, oh, that guy would be a really nice last wide receiver on the roster, those guys kind of fit that mold. Bowden had some flashes last year. You guys know how I feel about Keith if you've been a long time or short time viewer of this show. He's a guy that has been in the system for a really long time. And the Saints have historically done that with receivers, where you have guys where it's like, man, you look back and you go on like Football Reference or whatever, and you go, they spent 6 years in New Orleans. And then you forget that it's like, well, yeah, I mean, technically if they played 2 games 1 year, like they were a part of the team. And that's what happens with a lot of these guys. And they get called up and they get called down. They're brought down, released, re-signed to practice squad, elevated. You guys get the ordeal. I'm going to throw this name out there just because it's fun.
Don't do it.
What's Smith doing?
Don't know, don't care.
You know exactly what I said. I'm just throwing it out there. You know exactly where that was.
I did. I know your facial expressions by now too, so I knew it was coming. I've been waiting for it from John Butler in the comments too. If he's lurking around tonight, because he likes to jab me with the Trash Quan Smith stick, pretty often as well.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. Let's see. Curse of Dennis Allen on Twitter asks, can we get Neville Gallimore from Dallas? He's a rotational defensive tackle. Losing Malcolm Roach now, you do have a little bit, maybe even more than a little bit of a need there. Bob, who are some defensive tackles that you like?
Yeah, fully agree. And Gallimore's a possibility. A guy I want to see the Saints bring in the worst way is Tim Settle. We talk about Chase Young, and Montez Sweat and how well they played with Washington before they had their fire sale last year. Well, part of that awesome defensive line was Tim Settle, who had a decent year with Buffalo, who he signed with as for a 1 year free agent deal last year. Tim Settle is the kind of guy. He's going to stuff the run. He's a great run defender, and he's a good enough pass rusher that he commands double team blocking. And any guy that's going to command a double team, especially an inside guy, that's going to free up one-on-one blocking opportunities for at least one of the guys on the edge. Whether it's Cam Jordan, whether you bring in Chase Young on a prove it deal, and now all of a sudden Chase is facing one-on-one blocking almost every week. Pretty good scenario. That's the kind of guy that Tim Settle is. Javon Kinlaw from the 49ers, very good situational player as well. I know everybody's going to want Eric Armstead, who just got released by the 49ers. Don't get me wrong, I would love Armstead on this defensive line, but unless Armstead is willing to take a little bit of a smaller deal, a smaller contract than what he has been getting, I can't see him joining the New Orleans Saints. But you give me a Tim Settle, Javon Kinlaw, Jordan Phillips from the Bills is also available. You pair that up with Brian Brisset inside, what's his name? Nathan Shepard is a rotational piece. Colin Saunders is a rotational piece. Now I'm feeling pretty darn good about that interior rotation again.
I think the biggest thing for the Saints, and it changed very quickly, because when we had this conversation last week, we said, well, safety might be an underrated spot. And all of a sudden, with the signing of Willie Gay, I don't think that's the underrated spot. I think defensive tackle is still a more underrated spot. I think safety still is.
Uh-huh.
But in terms of need, underrated need, I now have flip-flopped those two to thinking defensive tackle is a little bit more of a need. You might be thinking, well, you're crazy, Brendan, you're a little crazy. Like, look what New Orleans has done. I think for me, seeing the strength of New Orleans during like 17, 18, 19, 20, that 4-year span, was the strength of the defensive line rotation. I still think it's there. I think it's mightily depleted from that time. Edge rusher, I won't even bring up. I think that's a spot where New Orleans could look to the draft. I still think they could look free agency, but defensive line as a whole now worries me just a little bit. But that's just me.
Well, and you bring up a good point. I mean, you lost Malcolm Roach, and I mean, you're not talking about a perennial Pro Bowler or anybody like that. But Roach was a key part of the rotation. And yes, I know you lost Marcus May as well, but you still have, as long as you still have Marshawn Lattimore, Paulson Adebo, and Alontae Taylor on your roster, you want those three guys on the field as much as possible. So, with that being said, Tyrann Mathieu is going to be your safety, a safety, excuse me, and you feel pretty highly about Jordan Howden. So, there's your 5 defensive backs right there. And, you add in Willie Gay, who is athletic enough, folks, that he was often used as a spy by the Kansas City Chiefs on running quarterbacks like Josh Allen, like Lamar Jackson, and was very effective in that role. So in other words, Dennis Allen, Joe Woods, they don't have to play 3 safeties, while also playing 3 cornerbacks, and 2 linebackers. But the defensive line, especially given the uncertainty at the edge, you need disruptive interior defenders. You have one in Brisset. Nathan Shepard, he was a solid signing last year. Don't get me wrong, but he's not going to be a guy that offensive coaches are going to say week in and week out, we got to account for this guy. That changes if you bring in another guy to disrupt the interior of the offensive line. So yeah, I mean, I'd agree with you. I still think safety is a need. I'd like to see them bring in another quality, two-way safety, the kind of guy that physical enough that could step up into the box, but also athletic enough where he's not going to be a liability in coverage. But yeah, to me, if we're doing a modified dot or drop, and you ask me to choose which is the bigger need, defensive tackle or safety, I would agree with you and say defensive tackle.
Whoa, I got a nod of approval from Bob Rose. Well, we'll go one more here in the chat before we do some dot or drop ourselves and bring up the guys that we're still looking for as guys for New Orleans to sign if we were betting people. Curse of Dennis Allen asked, does New Orleans sign a corner? If so, who? Right now, I say no. I don't think the Saints do. I think when you have and you look at Paulson Debo, Marshawn Lattimore, you look at Alontae Taylor, who had a little bit of an up and down year, and then Isaac Yiadom, who is a free agent as well. If you bring him, like, that would be the one, just bring him back, and then you're done. Solution to the problem. Now, you might be thinking, well, what's, Marshawn Lattimore up in the air, this and that. Right now, he's on the roster. I think if the Saints just bring back Isaac Yiadom, I think that's it. You don't need to play with that anymore. Those four, super solid. If one guy goes down, you have confidence in the other three. I think that is actually one of the stronger points of this Saints team.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and it will be as long as Marshawn Lattimore remains a Saint. When, by the way, I believe he will, for at least this season. But if the Saints bring in a corner, it's going to be a slot specialist, because I know they worked out Alontae in the slot. Because again, when you have Alontae Taylor, Paulson Adebo, and Marshawn Lattimore on your roster, you want all three of those guys on the field as much as possible. And Yiadom played well enough that when Lattimore went down, Yiadom was able to play outside corner, and they were able to keep Alontae in the slot. Ideally, they'd like to work Alontae on the outside receivers more often, but you need a guy that could play the slot to do that. And right now, the Saints really don't have one. They brought in Avonte Maddox for a visit. He left town without a contract, but at least they set the groundwork there. Other slot guys they could bring in, Arthur Millette, who has done one stint with the Saints already. Fabian Moreau. Why not pick the Denver Broncos roster? Since Sean Payton's picking so many former Saints. Rock Ya-Sin, who's had a couple good years as both an outside corner, and a little bit in the slot as well. So if they bring in a cornerback, it will be a slot specialist specifically for that role.
Fun fact, I called a college game for Rock Ya-Sin before he transferred to Temple. He played at Presbyterian College, which is no longer a Division I football school. That's why he transferred to Temple. But he did play a game against my alma mater, the Running Bulldogs of Gardner-Webb. And I remember going into that game and getting, going over your rosters and making your call sheets and having phone calls with the coach. And I was like, there's no way this is this kid's name. Rock Ya-Sin. That's an awesome name.
It is.
But yeah, that was just your little fun facts of the day. Bob, we'll go into, give me your favorite out of all the free agents, offensive or defensive. You got Willie Gay right. I kind of know where you're going with this, but who is the guy the Saints need to sign, whether it be wave 1, wave 2, wave 3, wave 74 of free agency? Who is the one guy you want to see in the black and gold?
Player or position?
Player.
Okay. Connor Williams, guard, Miami Dolphins. I've been yelling for a guard. I expected them to at least seek a guard early in free agency. His teammate with Miami, Robert Hunt, just signed a huge deal with the Carolina Panthers, who brought in 2 top tier guards to hopefully keep Bryce Young alive for at least one more year. So yeah, I mean, some of the younger guards were going off quick, but Connor Williams is not one of them, and he's only 26 years old. Had a couple good years with the Dolphins, couple very good years with the Cowboys. Can play either guard or center spot. So yeah, Connor, I'll give you my name, Connor Williams. You thought I was going to say KJ Osborne, I'm sure.
I fully expected that. Fully expected. KJ Osborne. For me, I think offensive line is the biggest need. But selfishly, I'm going to say Hunter Renfrow. Because it's one of those things where it's almost been written in the stars. It makes a lot of sense. I'm extremely biased. He's a Carolina kid who had no legitimate offers anywhere to play college football. I believe the story when he walked on at Clemson and ended up with the biggest catch in the history of that school.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That whole senior year works himself into being a day 3 pick. Plays really well for Oakland / Las Vegas. I'd love to see him in the black and gold. Only suggestion if he does, don't just hand him 13. Like, can we maybe not do that? It might cause a little bit of an uproar.
I don't know, man. Wasn't that his college number 2 or at Clemson? I thought so.
It's been all the way through, but you know how people get. So yeah. Curse of Dennis Allen. You wanted to get one more in, didn't you? You said draft a punter? ? No, I think Headley's here to stay. Like, I know he didn't impress a whole lot of people. I'm on that list too. I didn't see anything from Headley where I was like, ooh, yeah, I can't believe we gave up Blake Gillikin for this. But he won the job, and they could easily bring in a punter to compete. I think they do, because they do every year. Right? Punters and kickers always have competition in camp, whether it's serious competition or not. It's always there. Someone will compete with him, but it's going to be his job. And also drafting a punter. Like, is this Madden? Are we Madden again? Where somebody scouted a punter and it's like a gem to draft in the 7th round? Like, no, punters go undrafted.
Wasn't Thomas Morstead drafted though?
Yes, but Bob, I hate to do the whole age thing to you again, but think about how long ago.
I realize.
But punters nowadays don't get drafted.
No.
It's unfortunate because punters are people too. I said the same thing about fullbacks. Punters are people too. Punters are people too, so much to the point where you guys are going to laugh at me if you didn't already know this. I play punters in my fantasy league. I do. You get points for inside the 20.
Oh, okay.
And believe it or not, it does sometimes affect the outcome of the game. Somebody loses by 1 point, they're like, "Dang it! Why did my punter have one more inside the 20? Why was it a touchback?"
Man, if I lose by 1 point because of a punter in fantasy, I'm destroying property over that one.
I gotta add you. We gotta put fantasy this year.
I don't know. I don't know if you want to do that, but enter at your own risk.
It's fun. All right, daughter drop before we head out of here. Bob, daughter drop. The Saints make at least 2 signings by the end of Sunday.
I've said that for a couple of days now. We're entering the second wave into free agency because of the legal tampering period. Thanks for that oxymoron, Roger Goodell. Because of the legal tampering period, Monday, Tuesday are basically your first wave of free agency. So we're out of that and we're entering your second wave now. So you already got a huge need crossed off. At linebacker with Willie Gay. I believe they still have defensive tackle to look at. Don't be shocked if they look at a safety. We've talked about receivers. We've talked about the offensive line. So I think they come out of this weekend with 2 signings. At those positions somewhere. So I'm going to go Dot.
All right, hit me.
My daughter dropped. You pretty much already gave me your opinion on whether they're going to be able to sign Chase Young. So I will instead say that assuming you are correct and that the Saints and Chase Young do not come to an agreement. So daughter drop then. The Saints will then turn around and pursue another edge rusher of the remaining available in free agency.
That is a good question because I don't know if they do it in free agency, right? I believe that they could look towards the draft, but I'm gonna have to cheat a little bit and pull up a list of defensive.
Dorrance Armstrong is a guy everybody wants from the Cowboys. Other than that, you got Bryce Huff, Leonard Floyd, Jerry Hughes, Charles Harris, Romeo Aquara, Derek Barnett, Yannick Ngakoue, William Golston. There's that notepad you were making fun of me before earlier.
Yeah, no, I'm like pulling mine up and going, there's not a it's not a soup it's a don't get me wrong, it's decent, but it's not one where it's like, ooh, let me go grab,
If you ask me, sorry to interrupt you, there's a bunch of Tano Passignos on this list. A bunch of players that could be a quality part of your rotation, but not be a difference maker. In other words, you still, and this is my opinion, and even if they were hypothetically to sign Chase Young to a 1-year deal, I still think they go out and draft an edge rusher early.
I was thinking they could, like when you said Passigno, I'm thinking like Kentavious Street, but like we've done that before, there's nothing on that jumps out at me enough to be like, yes, that's the guy that you go get, which is another reason the team's bringing Chase Young in for a visit. He is clear and far and above and away. Clear, far above away, the top tier defensive end. And DJ, thanks for throwing that out there because I was about to say it too. Is you got to remember the Saints just got 3 extra draft picks, as well.
3 picks, but yeah,
it might not be a big, you've used a 5th round pick on somebody, but I could see the Saints looking that way, opposed to signing a guy that's like, because that's what I like. That's what, especially now after some of this first wave, you just kind of look at it and you're like. Kind of like the cake that's been sitting in the fridge a little too long. You're like, should I eat it? Kind of tempting, but I don't know. Is that green stuff frosting or mold? Like that's kind of what this free agency class seems like, at least at defensive end. I think the Saints are better off looking elsewhere. I think the other thing too to remember, and I know he was a big guy of yours last year, we didn't see a whole lot of Isaiah Foskey. And what is that going to look like moving forward? I don't know. All right, dot or drop. The Saints sign a quarterback in wave 2 to back up Derek Carr.
Drop. And you asked me that a week ago, and I've written about it a couple times. I thought for sure they were going to pursue Sam Darnold or Drew Lock because they both have experience in Kubiak's system. They're both gone. Essentially, the backup quarterbacks you have left now are Tyler Huntley, Carson Wentz, Joshua Dobbs, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Ryan Tannehill. So no, they obviously like what they've seen in Jake Haener, or Coobs, like Clint Kubiak likes what he's seen on film from Jake Haener, enough to feel comfortable. And remember, Derek Carr, knock on wood, Derek Carr's a pretty versatile player. He got banged up a lot last year, but he did not miss a start. So they're not prioritizing backup quarterback in any way, shape, or form. So drop. I don't think they sign one.
You think they sign one at all?
It wouldn't surprise me, if a scraps kind of guy entering training camp that everybody's going to immediately call another training camp arm and this and that and everything else. So they're not going to go into training camp with only two quarterbacks and whatever undrafted guy they have. I don't think they're going to sign a quarterback during this period.
You know who I would like, and you said his name. I think Jimmy G would be really interesting to have as a quarterback.
And again, he knows that system, so there's that too.
He was really good in that system too. Now, if we want to get crazy, Joshua Dobbs doesn't fit the system at all, but that would be fun. All right, throw one at me, and let's sign off. And thank you all for tuning in tonight. These are some of the biggest numbers I've seen in a while in terms of live viewership. So we appreciate you guys. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Daughter drop. I'm going very specific here. Von Bell, just recently released by the Carolina Panthers. Von Bell will be back in a New Orleans Saints uniform.
Yeah, shout out to Mark over on Facebook who DM'd me about that yesterday, and I might not have got back to him until this morning. But I said I think that there are better fits at safety for the Saints in free agency, but I would not be surprised at all because of his knowledge of the system. And let's face it, I mean, he's not that, I say that old, but he's not that old when it comes down to it. I'll dot it. Like I said, I think there are some better fits. I think there's some younger guys, some guys that are a little bit more athletic. And we talked about this recently, right? Like the Saints aren't going to get in on some of these bigger name guys.
Right.
Are there some safeties that I think would be great in New Orleans? Sure. Can the Saints afford them? Probably not. Whether it be Simmons, I don't really know the market value. I've always liked Budda Baker, but I don't know if that's going to be a guy that's going to be out of the Saints price range either. But Von Bell, like I said, knows the system, was a playmaker when he was in New Orleans. Remember that last season in New Orleans is the reason he got paid so much money.
Mm-hmm.
I could see him coming back. The Saints just lost Lonnie Johnson. I know they still like Jonathan Abram. I don't really know why.
Right.
But Von Bell would be an upgrade there in that kind of rotational safety. And with some of the youth they have back there, like Jordan Howden, like would a guy like Von Bell and Tyrann Mathieu, would those guys be of benefit to him? I think so. So yeah, I'll dot it. Von Bell back in the black and gold. I don't hate it at all. All right. Oh, well, Calvin threw this out. Rather have Morstead back than Bell. I'm actually really surprised. And this speaks to Thomas Morstead than it does to anything. I'm shocked it was a 2-year deal.
Yeah.
To return to New York. Like the fact that I figured this was the retirement tour year. It still could be. You could sign a 2-year contract to retire after a year. But it seems like he has all intention of kicking for another 2 years. So, good for Morstead. Real happy for him. And the fact that, and some of you guys have seen the photo, I'm sure a lot of you have, but the photo of him re-signing, you have the jersey that he wore in the Super Bowl framed up behind him. One side was the newspaper from the NFC Championship. The other side was the newspaper from the Super Bowl victory. And then above all that was a picture of the Superdome. So Morstead still, and he said it a ton, right? New Orleans will always be home. And he's one of those guys where wherever he goes, I'll root for him. And there's a lot of Saints guys like that, right? Ultimately. So, all right, guys. Well, like I said, a lot of you have hung out with us today. Bob, I told you the numbers last week. These numbers make last week look puny.
Nice.
So really happy to see those numbers. Thanks for hanging out with us, especially in the offseason. I know it can get boring, especially when the Saints don't do a whole lot. There's a lot to speculate on. I think that's why you guys have hung out with us. So I really appreciate it. I know Bob would appreciate if you guys went and read some of the work that he's been doing. You guys saw him rubbing his eyes. He's been punching that clock lately.
I'm tired.
And he's got a new puppy. So that's gonna make your life fun in multiple ways. We've all had new puppies before. But Bob, where can everybody follow you and your work as you continue to speculate, but also break the news on what's going on with the New Orleans Saints?
Folks, yeah, not only that, and the individual draft profiles, that I've, spent tons of time, putting together too, through my own analysis, will be coming out very soon as well. You can follow all that and more on my personal page, Bob Rose, ROSE on Facebook, at Bobby R 2613 on Twitter. Myself, John Hendricks, Kyle Mosley, Ross Jackson, all of us at the Saints News Network, at Saints News on Twitter. Or the SI.com team page. Make sure you keep Saints fans especially, coming in over to the Bayou Blitz Facebook page and Bayou Blitz Twitter page at Bayou Blitz Pod. Keep beefing up those numbers, especially not only during free agency, during the draft. We're streaming live shows over all 3 days of draft coverage. Easiest way to follow that is going to be as members of the Bayou Blitz Facebook page.
And for myself, you can follow me on virtually everything at BT Boylan. Make sure to check out Bob, all of his work, along with the rest of the Saints News Network at Saints News. We got to be close in that Facebook group to 2K, if we're not already. I honestly have not checked as of late, but Bob and I promised as soon as we get to 2,000 members, we're going to be doing some stuff for you guys. And we're still at 1.9. So you guys have, the rest of the offseason to bump those numbers up. I do want to shout out real quick, because you guys know I like sharing things with you guys and whatnot about personal life. But I did want to give a quick shout out to Tim Kraft, who's the head coach of the Gardner-Webb Brennan Bulldogs men's basketball team for the last 11 years. Took and accepted a job at Western Carolina. So his run in Boiling Springs is over, but took the Running Bulldogs to their first ever NCAA tournament appearance and was a huge part in the documentary that I was a part of, capturing and reliving that season. So Tim, just wanted to say thank you for everything you did, not only for the documentary, but the time at Gardner-Webb as well. With all that, hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Bayou Blitz. We will be back next Wednesday to hopefully bring you up to date on what at that point are we on wave 29 at that point? But we'll be back with another wave of free agency. In the meantime, like we said, go follow Saints News and Bob Rose's wonderful work. Till then, find some peace, spread love, practice positivity. See you later.